panelists. I wanted to thank the organizers for this incredible conference, and thank you for the opportunity to take part in it. My name is Uriel. I'm head of the markets department at the ICA. I am an economist. I was previously deputy chief economist and head of the antitrust division in the authority. So this panel, I have two challenges. The first challenge is we're after a very great talk of Michal on this topic, so I hope we won't go over the things she said. And the second challenge is I have two Davids on the panel. So I wanted to address this problem by addressing their first letter of their last name, but that's also a problem, so in your names. So we have, what? The truth is, yeah, it's a good thing you don't look exactly alike. David Gilo is full professor at the Buchmann Faculty of Law at Tel Aviv University. He received a Doctor of Juridical Science from the Harvard Law School and is a PhD candidate in economics at Tel Aviv University. He has served as Director General of the Israeli Antitrust Authority and as a member of the Israeli Antitrust Tribunal. We have David Genesov with us. He's a professor of economics at the Hebrew U of Jerusalem. Previously, he taught at MIT. He specializes in empirical analysis of industrial organization, especially from a historical perspective, as well as the economics of the housing market. He has consulted on antitrust matters for both the Israeli Competition Authority and private sector firms. We have Itai Paldor, which is a professor in the law faculty at Hebrew U. He was a partner and head of the litigation department at Tadmor Levy & Co. law office. So I want to talk about something that some might say isn't exactly antitrust, but has a great impact on the way we analyze things we observe. And sometimes it is quite hard to understand everyone's motives in this complex arena because the rules we all know so well do not apply here. And some might argue that if they were in charge of the plot, they would rewrite it. Yes, you guessed right, we're going to talk about the Game of Thrones. Now, seriously speaking, this panel will discuss concentration. Michal Halperin spoke widely about economy-wide concentration, but we also want to discuss market concentration. And just to give a small, quick background, the law about market concentration says that when the government wants to allocate an asset, then the government officials need to take into account competitive concerns. If the asset they want to allocate is on a specific list that we can change, by the way, anytime, so if it's on this list, then they need to come and they need to ask for counseling from the authority, and we may advise the officials in case there's a problematic candidate in the bid, or if we want to make the process more competitive. So we have both what Michal Halperin talked about, which is economy-wide concentration, but we also have market concentration. And I want to start with David Gilo. You were the general director when this law was enacted, and I wanted to hear, do you think that the Israeli authority didn't have enough tools to deal with the big companies, that we needed a special law in this field?
Yeah, so I admit that I was one of the drafters of this concentration law that Michal was talking about. Together with the Assistant Attorney General, we actually wrote this part concerning allocation of government assets. So what we saw when we drafted this is all of the phenomena that Michal illustrated to you. A small group of business groups controlling essential facilities, media, and also many dominant firms and monopolies. They had bargaining power ordinary bargaining power vis-a-vis consumers, which is market concentration, the ordinary concentration that we all are familiar with. And here there was a gap in antitrust law because not all of these transactions or mergers that we can stop as an antitrust authority. Some of them are licenses granted by the government, say to a new cellular firm. So if this raises ordinary market concentration issues, this mandatory recommendation that you have to get from the antitrust authority, from the competition authority, is very helpful in order to prevent mistakes. But also bargaining power vis-a-vis the government, vis-a-vis the legislator. This is the new area that Michal was talking about, which was more challenging. I didn't totally understand the relationship between this and the digital giants. I still have to talk to Michal about it because in my view the digital giants certainly raise concerns, but I think that these are ordinary market concentration concerns. They're challenging, and we need an open mind. But I don't see them, in Israel at least, as bargaining power vis-a-vis the government. Maybe in the US there is such a problem, but I'm not sure it exists in Israel. So the thing is that one of the reasons that these business groups became so powerful was that the government gave them these rights. So natural gas is an example where the government, one of the reasons we have a natural gas monopoly in Israel is that the government gave too many licenses to the same companies. And typically what happened was that the government had an auction as to who would win the government asset or license or franchise, etc. So, the worst case scenario was shakshuka, like Michal mentioned, where even the price the government received wasn't the highest bid. But the mainstream, I think, outside the shakshuka story, was that the government gave it to the highest bidder. But the thing is that the highest bidder might bid a high price, not because of efficiencies, but because he makes the largest monopoly rent or rent stemming from bargaining power vis-a-vis the government, and that's why he has the highest bid. So, this causes distortions. So, take the Israeli cellular market. The mechanism was that in order to get a cellular license, you have to give a huge amount of money to the government, and you win the bid if you're the highest bidder. That's the way it used to be at the time. And the reason that a company was willing to pay such a price might have been because it counted on tacit collusion going on in the cellular market, and then it could recoup this investment. And indeed, when the government switched its way of thinking about the cellular market in Israel and started allowing firms to enter this market without this high payment, or even said to the firm, listen, you're going to pay a payment, but if you grow and be a maverick, you're going to get this payment back. This prevents the distortion of monopoly pricing. And a similar distortion could happen with bargaining power vis-a-vis the government. Even though it's more vague, it's a real problem in Israel. So, of course, this high bid can be used in order to cover government expenditure, and then the government can collect less taxes. But this is an inefficient way to fund government expenditures, because in the tax system, you can minimize distortions caused by taxation by, for example, taxing the rich more than the poor, taxing in a way that won't distort activity as much. But with a monopoly distortion in the market, or bargaining power vis-a-vis the government, there's a distortion that is very difficult to minimize. So it's a bad idea to give an asset to the highest bidder and then raise less taxes, because this creates deadweight loss, distortions, bargaining power, political power, that you cannot minimize this distortion. whereas using the tax system is a more efficient way to raise money for public expenditure. So, farmers are an example. It's better to subsidize farmers directly than allow them to cartelize the market like we do and protect them from import like for the most part we do. So, and the same intuition in my view applies to overall concentration, to bargaining power vis-a-vis the government, even though this is a new concern, a new topic that we have less literature about. So indeed the challenge, like Michal mentioned, was to develop a methodology how to deal with this overall concentration issue with so little or none literature about it. So one way to go about it was to develop a list of rules of thumb of numbers. If you're big, so-and-so big, then you can't do so-and-so, etc. And another way was to do ad hoc case-by-case analysis of each case on its own. And we sort of went on an intermediary methodology in the law where, as Michal said, there's a list. There's a list of essential facilities, and there's a list of concentrated entities, and this is defined more or less using very accurate criteria. But then, if the government wants to allocate an essential facility to one of these concentrated entities, then there will be a case-by-case analysis of whether this raises considerable or substantial issues of bargaining power vis-a-vis the government. So it's similar to antitrust in the sense that you examine the incentive and also the ability to create the harm. So it's a combination of incentive to create harm and leverage that you have over the government for some reason to create this harm. And in the statute itself, we put an exception that if allocation of an essential facility to a particular business group is actually good for the consumer, then the business group should get the facility. So harm to consumer welfare was an exception, where in such a case, the overall concentration issue, which is much more vague, would not be considered. But I think this issue that Michal mentioned about being sure not to harm competition in the bid itself, I'm not sure this is a good idea, because anytime you say no to a business group in a bid, then you harm competition in the bid, right? So, by definition almost, it will harm competition in the bid. But, even if you have one other potential firm that can buy the asset with no harm to market competition, and giving it to a particular business group considerably harms overall concentration, then it might not be a good idea to give the asset to the business group. Okay, I think I'll stop here and leave the rest for the